All right, Exodus chapter 12. The 10th plague has come. The firstborn in all the households of Egypt has died. Everyone. It says in every household, there was not one household where there wasn't someone who died. It affected everyone, except for the Israelites, those that put the blood of the lamb on their doorposts and the lintels on the sides and the top, and they had the Passover, and they were ready to go, ready to leave, as God had promised them. So, chapter 12, verse 31. It says, "And then he being Pharaoh, called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, Rise and go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flocks, your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also." And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We shall all be dead." So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. And they baked unleavened bread, cakes, of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years, and it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on the very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is the night of the Lord, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout their generations. So 430 years from the time that Jacob and his family, those 70 people, came into Egypt. You know that Joseph was already there in that place where he'd been able to protect the people from the famine and all that. That place was number 2 in the land. We know that they were given the land of Goshen. And when that 430 years, they had multiplied greatly. The Bible tells us a few chapters back that the Israelites may have outnumbered the Egyptians. There was a lot of them. And that they were worried about it because they were so numerous. And what if they joined with our enemies, to fight against us? And so they were worried about that, and they started killing off the firstborn and everything. But the Lord protected them and sent Moses to deliver them, to fulfill the promise that he had made, that he'd told Abraham about many years before that his descendants, before any of them were born, before that his descendants would sojourn in this land and be strangers there. But when they left, that they would take with them great riches, that they would plunder the land and be driven out. And here you see them being driven out. Pharaoh's like, "Okay, Moses, grab your people and go." The people of the land paid them to leave, basically. He gave them favor in their sight. Said, "Yeah, here, take the gold, take the silver, take the clothes, just go before we're all wiped out." They had seen what the Lord was doing, what Yahweh was doing, how He'd come against them, how He had proved Himself to be God. The plagues and everything, He showed Himself to be mightier than all the gods of Egypt that they served. Egypt is in ruin at this point. Economically, they're trashed. All their cash crops and everything are gone. And now all the firstborn in the household. Some we were talking last week afterwards about some translations say all the firstborn males, but that's not really there. It's all the firstborn of everyone. Animals, people, and everything. So a great many people of the Egyptians died. The land is devastated. And the people are like, yeah, take what you want to take, man. Just go. Just get out of here. Just leave us alone before we all perish. And so I don't know that it was so much that they had favor in the sense that we would think of favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, just like, yeah, go, please, go. Yeah. The Lord fulfilled that promise. That promise given to Abraham when he didn't have any descendants. And here we see His faithfulness in doing it and how it works out to the T, to the letter of that promise. Very much God's faithfulness to His children. These Egyptians, these are the Israelites rather, they knew who they were. They knew about these things. It may not have been common. After 430 years, you kind of start forgetting things, you know. Stuff that happened 430 years ago. What do you know about what happened 430 years ago? Not a whole lot, but you kind of hang on to some of it. They had some idea what was going on. They drove them out. And it's to be that observance, that memorial, to remember that the Lord kept that promise. Verse 43 says, And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it, but every man's servant who is bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then he may eat it. A sojourner and a hired servant shall not. In one's house it shall be eaten. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break one of its bones. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as a native of the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat it. One law shall be for the native born, and for the stranger who dwells among you. Thus all the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. And it came to pass on that very same day that the Lord brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt according to their armies. Now when it says according to their armies, that's not to do with a bunch of soldiers marching out to battle or anything like that. It was an orderly executed in their groups. It wasn't just, everybody, hey, let's go, just a mob of folks taking off. It was kind of orderly and whatnot. They did things, probably by their families and everything, as we see later. They all did that in their tribes and whatnot. The Passover was not to be taken part by people that weren't circumcised. The sojourners and whatnot, the people, they're hired workers and whatnot, unless they were willing to enter into that covenant with them. It wasn't just for everyone. They weren't all welcome, but those who would go and be circumcised, that stranger, that person that was there, that was living among you, if he said, hey, you know what, I believe in the Lord too, I want to enter into that covenant and be circumcised, then he could come and take part of it. It's their evangelistic program, if you will. It's a lot easier to get church membership than it was here, but maybe. But still, the door wasn't closed. The Lord wasn't excluding anyone. Today, as Christians, we see that all who will believe, all who will come can. All you got to do is believe. Same thing was true for them. You see Yahweh, you see You see how he favors Israel and all that? You want to enter into that covenant? Go right ahead. Through the circumcision. The door wasn't closed to anyone. We see by Jesus' time with the Pharisees and everything like that, they kept as many doors closed as they could get closed and as tight as possible, and didn't want anyone else to come. But it was always there. Chapter 13. And then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine. And Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib. And it shall be, when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, of the Hivites, of the Amorites, the Hittites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, This is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up out of Egypt. It shall be as a sign to you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. In other words, you're doing this leavened bread, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and all this time, remembering what the Lord's done. Interesting here that it says, with these things, it says, when your sons come, when your children come and ask you, why are we doing this? That you tell them it's because of the Lord delivered us from Egypt and everything. We oftentimes have traditions, don't we? Hopefully we know why we have them. Why do we do what we do? You can look back at some things. The Catholic Church, as an example, is full of them. All sorts of traditions that you look at them and you wonder why they do the things they do. And for a good part of them, there's not a very good answer. Why do we do this? Well, it's tradition. Well, why did it start? Where did it come from? Why do we do what we do? And some of the traditions originally started with some good ideas that got lost in ritual. And so the idea here is that these things be done, but not just become simple rituals without meaning. That there's a remembrance to them. Much like the Lord's Supper, the communion that we take. It can get to be just a ritual, can't it? But it should mean something to us. We just read about it on Sunday morning in chapter 11 of 1 Corinthians. Man, don't do this in an unworthy manner. If it doesn't mean anything to you, don't do it. It's not good. If it's not in remembrance for what the Lord has done. And as Christians, as believers, we ought to be able to come back to the Scriptures and say, this is why we do things the way we do them. For example, we go out to lunch after service. We can go back to Nehemiah chapter 8, when they came and they read the Scriptures, they gave the sense of it. When they were done, everybody went and ate, right? That is the closest example to what we do now. I'm kidding about that. But, there ought to be reasons for why we do the things we do, what we practice in these things. It goes back to that. And they had the reminders of the little, if you've seen some of the pictures of the Jews and everything, you can still see them wearing a little box on their forehead right there. And then they got the other one wrapped around their hand. It's back into this. It comes back to that, to be that reminder. They got little pieces of scriptures in there and stuff But there's a reason for it, and it's a remembrance of what the Lord does. It points to Him in some way. Okay? Verse 11. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as He swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you, you shall set apart to the Lord all that opens the womb, that is, every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have, the male shall be the Lord's. But every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, and if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck, and all the firstborn of man, according to your sons, you shall redeem. This lamb that pays the price to redeem this one back, They're giving them to the Lord. And as we get into the Levitical laws and stuff, you'll see the offerings and everything that come about that. But that firstborn, those first fruits, the very first thing you do is honor the Lord with that. Now, we talk about, and regardless of whether you think it's, a biblical mandate to tithe now as believers or giving to the Lord, the idea of giving the first to the Lord is still there, isn't it? That's trusting Him, isn't it? He's asking them to trust Him. Hey, you got the firstborn there? If you're giving that over to the Lord, then, if you're going into the goat business, you kind of want more, don't you? You're going to trust Him with that. And it's bringing that first and offering it to the Lord. Lord, here you go. Because apart from Him, you wouldn't have that. The donkeys and all that, donkeys are useful animals. You could redeem them, buy them back with the lamb or everything. But if you didn't, it wasn't for you. It was for the Lord. And the same with the males, and we'll find out later on as this kind of translates into the Levites and all that, to serve the Lord. You buy them back. You didn't have to, send them away somewhere. But it's that recognizing that, it all belongs to the Lord, and coming and giving Him thanks first. Putting the Lord first in everything. We don't often do that. We don't always do that. Too often, in too many ways, the Lord gets the leftovers in our life, doesn't He? Sometimes serving the Lord's the last thing that we do. Oh, yeah, if I got time, I can do that. We talk about having things on our plate and the Lord giving us ministries. Well, shouldn't that be our first priority? And it's difficult when there's a lot of different things going on. And we have to keep our priorities right. If you have a family, you have your first responsibility in the Lord is to them. And yet sometimes, even especially among pastors and everything, it's easy to put the ministry before that. And yet our first calling is that of a husband and a father. To keep those things in order in the way that He does, but putting the Lord first in our lives. Doing what He's called us to do. We talk about in our giving, for us in this day, we'll go through and see how it was the harvest and whatnot, and the flocks and whatnot. For this in our day and everything, it's that check you write. Is it the first one or the last one? When you count your money, when you figure out how much you've got, does that part taken off? Is that yours or the Lord's? We look at that and say, am I giving some of my money to the Lord, or am I just, keeping part of His? It's giving that first, honoring the Lord first, trusting Him in provision and all of that. Saying, Lord, you first. And the idea of that serving the Lord first comes to mind. Where did we stop? 14. So it shall be when your sons ask you in time to come, saying, what is this? That you shall say, is by strength of hand that the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that open the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. And it shall be as a sign on your hand and on your frontals, between your eyes, for by strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. It's that remembrance of the Lord and His deliverance also. It's that gratitude, that giving thanks to the Lord, that you offer the firstborn and all that. The sons you redeem. It's in remembrance of those things. You know, the Lord's delivered us out of that same bondage too. You know, and so those offerings and that giving back, it's a thank offering. Lord, thank you for all that you've done. Verse 17 says, it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that God did not lead them by way of land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So they took their journey from Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and by night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. They remembered what Joseph had asked them to do. He says, man, when you leave, don't leave my bones here. Take them with me. Take me back to that promised land and everything. So the children of Israel, they kept their identity. They knew who they were. They knew where they'd come from. You know, they may have considered themselves, what would they consider themselves? Israelite Egyptians or whatever. You know, we got Chinese Americans and all that stuff. I don't know. But they kept their identity, and they knew who they were, and they didn't forget about Joseph. And they knew that their God was something special. And being in bondage for as long as they were, and the things that the Egyptians had put them in, that would be kind of hard to do. Most cultures get absorbed into other ones. In these days, and those following and all that, when the Israel was taken captive by the Babylonians and all that, and the Assyrians took them captive and everything, one of the things that they did was to take the people and scatter them out. So there wasn't a large number of them all in one place. And the reason they did that was so that they would lose their identity, their national identity. And here you had 70 people that came into this land 430 years ago, and they kept that identity even as they grew. When they came into the land of Egypt, Egypt was the powerful nation on earth at the time. And it had been real easy to just get assimilated and forget about Joseph and the rest of that stuff. But the Lord kept them together, and they grew, and they kept that identity. So much so that they even remembered to take the bones of Joseph with them. And the Lord led them by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. How many of you wish that the Lord would do that now? You know, we've got the Holy Spirit dwelling in us, and He leads us and guides us and all that. But sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, can't it? I have found over the years that usually the easiest thing to do to determine what the Lord's will is for me is just take another step, you know, and see where that leads us instead of trying to figure out the whole trip. You know, the Israelites were like this. They had this very visible leading of the Lord in their life. Come and follow me, He said. I'll lead you out. And He did. That pillar of the smoke and the fire was there for them to see that the Lord was definitely leading them. We look at this and knowing what's coming, we look at this and we go, all right, man, how could you not have faith? How could you not trust the Lord in seeing this? At this time, right here, they're in a place where there's victory. Everybody's shouting and praising God and everything. You know, imagine what the children of Israel are thinking at this time. Man, we got all the plunder and the goodies, and the Lord's delivered us, and we're not slaves anymore. Here we go. This is great. Look, there's the pillar of smoke. Oh, man, this is great. That 430-year-old promise is, well, it was longer than that since Abraham. And here we go. There's the Lord. Let's go. But how easy, even with that we lose that faith. Even when the visible evidence of the Lord's leading is in our lives. The Lord says here that He didn't lead them up through the land of the Philistines. That was the short way, the easy way, unless they saw war and be discouraged and say, you know what, never mind, I'm going back. How often we get discouraged by things and end up turning around and going back to even those places of bondage because it's where we're comfortable and what we know. We go back to what's familiar, don't we? When we lose sight of those things. Anyhow, so He leads them on to the Red Sea with this pillar in front of them. Chapter 14. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they turn and camp before Pi Hereth, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephron. You shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are bewildered by the land, the wilderness has closed them in. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people, and they said, Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? Our labor force is gone. We remember that Pharaoh, in his heart being hardened and everything, didn't want to let them go, but his servants came to him and said, Lord, our Pharaoh, let these people go, because if you don't, we're going to be ruined, man. It was clear that Yahweh was acting on their behalf and we're being ruined. And yet Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And here, even after they've let him go, you see that he hardens Pharaoh's heart one more time, and also the hearts of his servants. Why did we let them go? Now we'll come to ruin. We let our labor force go. Verse 6 says, So he made ready his chariots and took his people with him. Also he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt, with captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with boldness, so that the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen, and his army, and overtook them, camping by the sea, beside Pi Hahiroth, before Baal Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes and beheld the Egyptians marched after them, so they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us, to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, Do not be afraid, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. But lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So Pharaoh and his servants, their hearts are hardened. Why did we let our labor force go? We're really in trouble now. We're going to have to go to work, making bricks and whatnot. Why did we let them go? And they chase after them. The children of Israel do what oftentimes people do, what believers do. This isn't working out quite the way I thought. One minute you're praising God, you're following the parallel. This is great. Here we are. We're out by the sea. It's great. We're free. We're free. We're free. Here comes Pharaoh and his army. They cried out to the Lord, and then they complained to Moses. Why'd you lead us out here to die in the wilderness? What have you done? It's always somebody else's fault when things don't turn out quite the way we think they ought to, or they're not going the way we thought they should. Again, we see a case here where the Lord's leading and working in the people and everything, but stuff doesn't always look right. When we run into those hardships and stuff, we start complaining against the Lord. We want to turn back. They say, isn't it just like we told you there in Egypt? Leave us alone, man. Quit rocking the boat. How many of you like to have your boat rocked? Not usually, huh? We like smooth sailing, man. We like to have the pillar right in front of us and be following the Lord, just whistling along and having a good old time. But it's not always that easy. There's always the Egyptian army pursuing us in some way or another, isn't there? Isn't there always the enemy? We're free. We have victory. We can trust in the Lord. He'll fight for us. He'll go before us. He's got a plan and things are going to work out, but we don't always know that plan and can't always see what's going on. And sometimes it's easy to get afraid and be disheartened by the circumstances of things around us. I don't know how many of you have ever dealt with addiction or people that have been addicted to different things in their life, but it's hard to get them to put those things down and walk away from them. You know, they want to stand there with whatever it is, and okay, Lord, come take it away from me. You know, the Israelites were all for being delivered, but they didn't want it to be difficult. And oftentimes when we look back and we see that very thing that we were in bondage to and remember it and know that it's still there, and we still have to deal with it. We lose trust in the Lord. Oh, Lord, we should have just died over there in Egypt because, look, they're coming for us. That thing's there, to use the term, haunting you. It's there. But are you going to trust in the Lord? Moses' response was, you know what, guys, don't worry about those. Keep your eyes on the Lord and don't look behind you. So if we stop and start looking behind us, we'll see whatever it was that we've been, whatever bondage we've been delivered from is still back there. Oh God, what are you doing? Leading you forward. The Lord tells Moses, tell the people, calm down and look forward. Move forward. Get ready to go. And that's always that thing. We got to keep our eyes on the Lord and keep moving forward. You know, Christians who are following the Lord, who have their eyes on the Lord, you might fall sometimes, but you're going to fall forward. It's only when you turn around and start looking back there that you fall back. And even if you do, He still picks you up and brings you. Keep your eyes on the Lord and looking forward and trusting what He's going to do. Verse 15. I already read that. Read it again. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. But lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel will go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I indeed will harden Pharaoh's heart and the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Verse 19, and it says, and the angel of God, who went before them, the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was the cloud. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. What a picture of the Lord and his protection for us, isn't it? It says the Lord, the angel of the Lord. That's Jesus manifest in that, who is leading them, who is guiding them. And then you see him move to protect them from the enemy. We talk about the armor and everything of the Lord and everything, and the shield of faith and whatnot and everything, and that's there to protect us from that attack this way. But sometimes we forget that the Lord's got our back, just like he does here. That protection that we have from Jesus. Verse 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians, or confused them. And he took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots, and on their horsemen. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained, but the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Sometimes, as believers, we're following the Lord, and we know that he's leading us because we see the evidence. Well, not that cloud, but we know the Lord's leading. And things don't always go the way we think they are. It's not as smooth as we think it might be. We come up to obstacles like the Red Sea and don't know how we're going to deal with that, and find that the enemy's in hot pursuit behind us. And when we come to that place where we simply trust the Lord, instead of reasoning what he's going to do, and just trust that he will do, and continue to move forward, then we see the things where the Red Sea divides. It may not be that spectacular in our own lives, but we come up to those places where we know that the Lord has to intervene in some way to open that door, to make that way for us. And trusting that he can, that he will. And to move forward in that, to keep following. Jesus said, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. He says, those who look back are not worthy. You put your hand to the plow, you keep your eyes on the mark. So you're lying straight. Keep following, keep moving, keep going. Don't let the circumstances that surround you keep you from taking that next step and moving forward and trusting the Lord. Too many times in the life of a believer, they don't see the hand of the Lord at work in doing things like parting the Red Sea, because they get to the seashore and say no more, and stop following and stay where they're at, or turn back to whatever it was that they were comfortable with, instead of watching the Lord do His work, trusting Him. It's easy to get to that place where you're stopped. The Israelites are there. The Lord's put His protection around them. He's blocking the Egyptians from coming. The Red Sea opens up. They go through on dry land. We look at the people. He said there was about 600,000 men. That would have been between the ages of 20 and 60? So you add in the other ones, the older ones, the younger ones, the women and the kids and stuff like that. It's pretty easy to come up with a number somewhere between 2 and 3 million, which most people do. It's been real easy for the population of 70 from Israel first going into Egypt to grow to that amount, even under hardships, even under shorter lifespans and all that stuff. No problem. The Lord's there. That's a lot of people. It's a big deal. There's somewhere around that many people in the city of Phoenix, in the metropolitan area. They're on the move, orderly and all that. They've come up to the Red Sea and everything. It gets opened up. Now, we've seen the movies, haven't we? You look at that was there, 50, 75 feet gap there, and everybody's going through there, crawling on the rocks and everything like that. It wouldn't quite work out. There's a couple of different things that you can find in different numbers and everything, but they're all pretty much in there somewhere. It says all those people to come and cross the sea in one night. If they went in a narrow path, double file, the line would be 800 miles long, and it'd take them 35 days and nights to get through there. So much for that guy Charlton Heston in that show and everything. For that many people to get through there in one night, the sea had to open about 3 miles wide so that they could cross through there 5,000 abreast. That's a different picture, isn't it, than what you think about, than what your mind conjures up in all this. Imagine that opening in the Red Sea 3 miles wide and the water heaped up as walls around them. Must have been some high water, some big walls and all that stuff. It changes that whole picture, that whole imagination in there. Think about this. This was not a small thing. And the courage and the faith that it would have taken in the Lord to step out. You see this thing open up, but you still got to believe and trust in Him to get across, to go and to follow Him. And the Egyptian army goes in after them and gets wiped out when the water comes back down. Hollywood's never done a very good job of portraying that picture, have they? They see what the Lord's done, and after this, the Israelites trust Him. After this, Pharaoh's army is wiped out. We saw that video where it talked about how after the Exodus that there were these people that came in and almost wiped out the Egyptians completely. Financially, they're in ruin. Morally, they're in ruin. Morale is down. Everyone's lost somebody. Everyone's lost everything. Their workforce is gone. Their army is wiped out. The greatest nation on earth at that time is brought to its knees by Yahweh, by God, in a very bold way. It'd be interesting to see CNN reports of all this stuff, wouldn't it? And that same God is our God, is our Lord, is our Jesus, is the Holy Spirit dwelling in us. that leads us, that goes before us, that fights for us, that makes the way. And all He asks of us is what He asked them, to believe in Him and keep moving forward. And He takes care of everything else, doesn't He? Sometimes in small ways and small things, sometimes in very spectacular ways. But that same God that opened that Red Sea 3 miles wide for those 3 million people to walk across there is Lord of our life.